everyone, and welcome to another Helm to Tower video. This is going to be another video in the Intro to Destiny 2 series I'm trying to produce for newer players who are trying to get into Destiny 2 and try and learn some of the systems and various other things that are in the game. Or if you're also a returning player, the game has changed a lot probably since if you played during Forsaken or anything like that. So let's something you might have come across if you've been maybe playing a little bit and have come to the tower here and seen this thing, the Exotic Archive. And maybe if you're wondering what this is, basically it is for a lot of the exotics and vaulted content in the game. They also vaulted destinations that were tied to exotic quests to unlock the exotic weapons in Destiny 2, and as you know, those exotic weapons are some of the best in the game. They introduce them through cool quests or other various activities they drop from, but some of that content's been vaulted, but they still want to give people a way to acquire these awesome weapons. So their solution was this archive. As you'll see, there's a bunch of guns already in here. So here's a set of them from year 1, another set from year 2, and so on and so forth. But if you look at these, you'll notice when I hover over one of these, they cost a bunch of different currencies. As you know, like Glimmer's is pretty general. You'll accrue that through anything. The other one is from different planetary sources. So Baron Bro comes from the Dreaming City. Spin That Metal Leaves comes from the Cosmodrome. But the other two ones are these exotic kind of materials, which are named Ascendant Shards, and Exotic Ciphers come from a few different things. Mainly they're kind of later end-game material sources. So first I can show you Ascendant Shards come from the main things they come from are Nightfall missions. So if you see, I kind of get down in here, see it once you get to Master difficulty at 1580, you'll start getting Ascendant Shards from that, as well as when Grandmaster Nightfalls open up later this season. They can also drop from that more commonly. So you do have to level up pretty high to get those. But there's also some other sources, like namely vendors in the tower here. All of them have their own little track of rank rewards. And most of them at the end of their reset ranks do give you Ascendant Shards the first time you rank them up. So you can get a Ascendant Shard from Banshee, Shax as well, and so as well as Zavala and the Drifter. And that's for the first time during a specific season. So now we're in season 16. If you reset your ranks at one of these, you will get an Ascendant Shard, and you'll have to wait till a following season for that reset to reset, basically. And then you'll have another chance of getting shards from that. You can also get them from the season passes as well. So once you're kind of ranking, you see I'm higher rank here. You can see at rank 94, you get an Ascendant Shard. Rank 85 and rank 90, there's also some Ascendant Shards. And also the other current piece of currency, the Exotic Cipher, is also here on the track as well. The other place you get this from is from Zur. He is a vendor who shows up only on Friday and throughout the weekends in various locations. He can be in the tower, or he can be on some of the other planets. And basically he can give you a little mission where you'll run like a handful of strikes or other playlist activities. And once you do that, he will grant you an Exotic Cipher. But keep in mind, when you have one Exotic Cipher in your inventory, you can only have this one at a time. So that's why, if you saw on the track there, I'll go back real quick. It says not enough space. That means because I already have that one, I can only hold one at a time and only have that one at a time. So even if you have one and you go and do that Zur quest, you will not be able to turn it in for another one until you have a free slot to hold that single cipher. But anyway, that's how you get those currencies. I thought I'd go through some of these selections of exotic weapons and kind of shout out ones I think are like maybe quote-unquote must-haves, or ones that I think are just pretty fun to use. And as a new player who maybe, you're looking at, like, there's 7 or 8 weapons here, and even more and more as these progress, You might be like, where the heck do I even start with these? So let me just, shout out a few for you, give you some tips on why these are so good and useful, and you can go from there. If you pick the ones that speak most to you, really, is when it comes down to. So the first ones from these year one selections here, the first one I have to shout out for sure is Outbreak Perfected. This is one I enjoy quite a lot, and is specifically now in Season 16 for the Witch Queen. They gave a major damage buff to exotic primaries, which this Outbreak Pulse Rifle goes in your first slot. They all exotic primaries got a 40% damage buff, on top of Pulse Rifles getting an extra little 10% buff. So this Pulse Rifle in general got a major damage buff, and you'll definitely notice it once you grab one, that it just shreds through basic fodder enemies and becomes a great ad clearing weapon. On top of its special perk, where if you get a precision kill with a headshot with this weapon, it creates these little like red swarms of nanites, and you'll see it in the gameplay here. When you get those headshots, you'll create these little swarms that will track to other enemies and damage them, and even take them out in most cases, because they're that much stronger now because of that buff they gave the weapon. But also, I'll get a nice thing to know is with the exotic catalyst, you increase the damage of those nanites. Then enemies that die, and then the enemies that taken out create even more nanites, so you have even more of them going around once you have these catalysts. And catalysts are like extra unlocks to further enhance these exotic weapons that can drop from various sources. There's a list in the triumphs of where you can see where the specific catalyst drop for any given weapon is. But yeah, Outbreak Perfected's a great weapon to start with. It feels good. It's a good exotic primary. It's good for clearing out ads and enemies. This season in particular, for champion weapons, there are unstoppable pulse rifles. So this is going to be a great weapon to go to for doing end-game content with. So I definitely recommend it from this first set. The next weapon I definitely want to shout out is definitely a great boss damage DPS weapon, particular for like raids and higher end content, and that is Sleeper Simulin. Sleeper Simulin is just like a hard hitting, it penetrates enemies, so like even if they have kind of various buffs or defenses, this thing will just rip right through that and do the maximum amount of damage it possibly can. It has a pretty decent ammo reserve, and with the catalyst, you'll see this weapon has a catalyst as well, and this increases its charge time on that laser blast, so you can dish out a lot of damage with it. So it's definitely a great just go-to boss DPS of like, hey, you're maybe jumping into a raid for the first time, or maybe you need a good go-to weapon to just do some big damage to a boss really quick. This is definitely a great weapon to just pick up and go for that. So definitely recommend Sleeper Simulin for DPS and boss damage. A couple other ones here. I would say Polaris Lance is not too bad, especially this season, because again, the exotic primaries got a damage buff. This weapon, when you get precision hits, you're stacking up a charge to make your next shot in a solar explosive round, which will make a large solar explosion, which is pretty fun. So if you like explosions and those kind of things, this weapon can make them, and it's a pretty good time. So this one's not bad as well for a good like primary exotic, and it does solar damage, so it's good for like solar shields, or pairing with various like solar mods, solar well mods in particular. So not a bad pick either from this first stack. The rest of the weapons are okay, and I would say you can kind of just leave to collection purposes. I think like maybe one other worth shouting out is Whisper of the Worm. It's a heavy slot power weapon sniper, and is also pretty good for damage if you're good at like hitting those precision sniper shots. As long as you're rapidly hitting those precision shots, it'll return some ammo to the magazine, so you can keep hitting as hard as you can with it. So it definitely has some usability for DPS, but it definitely relies on your ability to land those precision precision hits consistently as you can. So I definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of like sniper rifles and that kind of stuff. Some of these other weapons I think you can ultimately either skip on or maybe come back to later if you're trying to maybe complete a set. You know, that'll definitely take some time if you're a newer player, but if that's what you're into, that's awesome. But I definitely think some of the first to go for are again, Outbreak Perfected and Sleeper Simulin. Definitely must-haves from this first set. Let's move on to the next set of exotics here. And there's a lot of good ones in this set in particular that I definitely am going to recommend. Another one, once again, a great DPS option, Izanagi's Burden. Is a great for DPS, specifically with those precision hits. As you see, its intrinsic trait is you hold to reload, and it puts a full damage worth of magazine, basically a full magazine worth of bullet damage into a single shot that you are doing, and then that will do that additional damage. And it's pretty good for DPS for sure. If you're good at hitting those precision hits, again, you can just do a big ton of burst damage and a lot of consistent damage as long as you can hit those crits with it. So it's definitely great boss DPS option for sure. So yeah, next up, another good, I would say more of a workhorse one, is Lemonarch. This bow kind of has a timing to it where if you time and aim your shot, you will create a burst of poison. This is great for champions in particular, especially if you have things like overload bows or anti-barrier bows, which is anti-barrier bows are actually the season, because if you apply that poison damage, and the champion starts doing their whatever their effect is, like turn on their barrier or start doing overload things, the poison itself that is attached to them and damaging them over time can actually counteract those abilities and stun them more quickly. So it's a really useful weapon in in-game content for that reason, and it's just fun to use because you can make those large poison clouds. And especially with things introduced in this season with Void 3.0, like volatile rounds, this becomes really strong because not only does you get that poison explosion, but you also get volatile explosions. So you can make a lot of explosions and like use this almost as an ad control, as just as a single precision hit bow shot can do. So it's pretty awesome and it's pretty useful, I would say, overall in end game content. So I definitely recommend Lemonarch for that. Some other ones here. Let's see. I know for PvP players and fans out there, there's a lot of hand cannons in particular from this year 2 set of Destiny. Ace of Spades is a great hand cannon for sure. As you can see, reloading and getting kills loads this magazine with extra damaging shots and also makes them explosive shots. So you can make a lot of fiery explosions and kind of always continue that role of get a bunch of headshots, reload, do a bunch of more damage with explosive shots, rinse and repeat. So it has a pretty fun loop there and is pretty strong and can be pretty strong and useful in PvP if you like those kind of hand cannons. The same with a classic originally from Destiny 1 and now in Destiny 2 is Thorn, because it is another one where you can kills this weapon, leave behind remnants, and you are putting on these poison effects on opponents, and you can kind of poison and damage them over time with the effects of this weapon. And it's pretty useful in PvP for just getting a quick shot in, weakening an opponent, and then coming in for a finish with maybe a different weapon. So definitely those are some great PvP options. Another unique one from this Forsaken set is this Sparrow. It's a little interesting. I might be thinking, well, it's weird to see a Sparrow in here with exotic weapons, but this was a unique Sparrow that you can only get from the Scourge of the Past raid that was vaulted. And the reason it's in here is because it has some unique perks that don't exist on other Sparrows that you can get randomly in the game. So that's namely is that it has a much faster top speed than other Sparrows, and also it has this perk, Stealth Running, which makes enemies less likely to shoot at you while you're blasting past them on a Sparrow, or lose the tracking on their shots towards you. So it can be pretty useful in some scenarios when you're trying to stay alive and get through a section with the Sparrow in particular. Namely, the most recent dungeon, Grasp of Avarice, has a section where you're running through on a Sparrow and need to get out of harm's way with enemies shooting at you all over the place. And the Sparrow definitely makes that encounter a breeze. So namely, I would say definitely some of the first options of weapons I would go for are things like Le Monarch, Izanagi's Burden, and then if you're into PvP, some of these hand cannons are in here, like Ace of Spades and Thorn are definitely recommended. There's some other weird and fun weapons in here too, like Jotun is super fun. It's dubbed the Toaster because it, like the front of it looks kind of like a toaster, and if it charges and shoots this big like fireball essentially at enemies and does a pretty good damage. It can be pretty devastating in PvP as well as like just fun to use in general PvE because you can shoot a big fireball and blow up a bunch of enemies. So it's a pretty fun time as well, and definitely a fun one, but it's not top tier by any means. Anarchy used to be a pretty top tier exotic for boss DPS, for ad control, for a bunch of number of things. It can still do some of these things pretty okay, like it's pretty useful for ad control or locking down areas. So it still can be a fun grenade launcher to use, but it's definitely not as strong as it used to be. So I definitely recommend some of these other exotics I already mentioned before going for that one these days. But that does it for year 2. Let's jump over to year 3 real quick. There's a couple in here that I think are definitely worth getting as well. The first one is pretty strong, is Wither Horde. This was a seasonal grenade launcher that launched with an earlier season, and basically it shoots this big pool of taken goo in an area, and as enemies go into it, it damages them over time. Or basically you can lock down an area, so if you know where enemies spawning at certain spawn points, you can just drop one of these pools and it'll sit there for a little while and enemies will just run into it, and it's pretty great. It's definitely a great exotic just to get started with, and help with ad control and ad clearing and those kind of encounters where you have a lot of ads to take care of before you maybe fight a boss or something. It's definitely very helpful for locking down areas in combat. So it's definitely a great one to go for. Also with its catalyst, it gets better handling, as you can see, but also gets auto loading holster, which basically means if you shoot it and then swap to another weapon and do a little bit of damage or take out an enemy or two with that weapon, it then fully reloads this, so you can then shoot a shot, switch to another weapon, get some shots out with that weapon, then switch back to this and immediately have a shot ready to go. So it's a great catalyst and great use for this weapon. It's definitely, I would say, even just overall, one of those, definitely a good first weapon to go for out of this exotic catalyst is the Wither Horde. It's a great pick all around. A couple other ones here I think are great are Ariana's Vow. This hand cannon intrinsically has anti-barrier. So let's say maybe you're in a season where you're not 100% feeling a anti-barrier mod weapon that we have, like we have this season, is bows and scout rifles, which I think are actually admittedly a better option in my personal opinion than Ariana's Vow. But let's say you have another season where the weapons are a little weaker, like maybe it's an SMG or something else that doesn't have that range. This is a great option to counteract that, as this weapon intrinsically has barrier champions, meaning you don't have to run a barrier mod. You can just run this weapon and then maybe run other mods on your arm slots, compared to having to run a champion mod and always have a champion mod equipped on one of those pieces. So this gives you that option. So it's definitely great for anti-barrier champions. There's some other weapons in this Kiosk too, like this Bastion I think it has intrinsically unstoppable powers, so it can unstop champions with it on its own without any help of mods. The same with this bow. This bow has this heavy bow, Leviathan's Breath, also has intrinsic unstoppable as well So they can be used for that in pretty good degree if you have if you need them for extra options. For if you're maybe, let's say, not a fan of those seasonal weapons, these exotics give you a couple extra options, so you don't have to run those mods, or if you're not a fan of maybe the particular weapons. So that's pretty nice, and definitely worth checking out if you're really strapped for mods, or generally weapons that you need to take down those kinds of champions and those end game things. So those are the main ones I want to get from there. There's some other fun ones as always, like Traveler's Chosen is a fun sidearm because as you get kills with it, you get stacks, and then you can the higher the stacks are when you reload, that gives you more and more of your ability energy back. So that's pretty fun to use. Ruinous Effigies is also another really fun one where it's a trace rifle, so it shoots a big purple laser beam, and when you take an enemy out, it turns them into a void sphere, as it says here. And basically, you can pick up that orb and either use your trigger, your shot button to do a big heavy slam, or you can make this sphere around you that damages enemies with inside the sphere. So it's an interesting, fun kind of loop there on that one. So yeah, there's plenty of cool, interesting weapons in this second tier. But I would say if you needed go-tos, for sure, I would say Wither Horde is definitely a great first one to go to. And then also Ariana's Vow is also some great first picks from this set. And lastly, we have these ones. There's not as many in here because these are the most recent ones from Beyond Light, but there's definitely a cool select few I definitely would recommend. Namely, TQ's Divination. TQ's Divination is a great ad control weapon, as what you need to do with it is when you first fire with it, it has tracking arrows. You'll see these little red reticles that go into enemies. The arrows will then track to those enemies, and then when you aim down sights with a bow and do a larger shot into one of those enemies you hit before with the tracking shot, it'll make a large explosion. So it's great for ad clear. This season in particular, again, we have anti-barrier bow. So this is really strong against those champions with barrier capabilities. So you can just literally explode their barrier if you set it up correctly, and it's a pretty fun way to do that. So I definitely recommend TQ's Divination from this selection of weapons. If you're into stasis from Beyond Light, and I'm doing some stasis builds, Hager's Scepter I would definitely say is a must-have because it does a lot of great synergistic things with stasis. In terms of, it is a trace rifle that shoots a big ice blast. It freezes enemies with that ice blast, or that ice laser. And then you get all the benefits from stasis, various stasis things of shattering enemies with those effects from your fragments and aspects, as well as making like elemental shards and things like that. It's definitely a great weapon for any kind of stasis build. So definitely recommend Ager's Scepter from this last selection here. But yeah, that's like an overview of most of the exotics in here. Definitely recommend, again, real quickly, I'll just go over them again from this first set. If you want to kind of focus and say like, hey, these are the ones what ones do you recommend getting first over these others, so I can be helpful in certain content, or maybe the ones you think are kind of the best out of these sets. Again, I would go with Outbreak Perfected and Sleeper Simulant from this first set of Red War exotics. For Forsaken exotics, I would go Izanagi's Burden and La Monarch. From the Shadowkeep exotics, I would go Wither Horde and Ariana's Vow. And then for Beyond Light exotics, I would go TQ's Divination and Ager's Scepter. There is still a ton of other great weapons in there. And again, I would say I'm not the biggest PvP player, so there are some other weapons in there that, if you're a PvP player, some of those weapons might be more for you. But I would definitely go check out some other people who are more in the PvP scene and what weapons they recommend if you're trying to look for those kind of weapons. For sure. These ones I pointed out are mainly for PvE purposes, so like, you know, just running strikes or doing raids or high-end content like Master Nightfalls or GMs with champions and all those kind of activities. All those weapons I pointed out here in this video are definitely going to be helpful for that. This last one, I would say, does not matter as much. As you can see, there's a lot of weapons in here that have the gray mark of these are sunset, so they're probably not going to be coming back anytime soon. Unfortunately, you can see there are a couple in here that this top row of 5 weapons you can probably get to if you would like. There's some fun ones in there. They're legendary weapons like Ascendancy is a great rocket launcher for DPS. This Salvager Salvo is a great grenade launcher, namely because it has chain reaction. So you can do a lot of explosions with these grenades. It's pretty great. So yeah, those are a lot of your weapons from this monument of lost lights to look out for. I definitely you know, hope this helped you figure out and give you a little bit of an idea of like, oh, these exotics sound interesting, and I'll hopefully the gameplay lets you see what they do in action. And yeah, thanks again for checking out another Helm to Tower video. Appreciate it as always. If you have any other questions about Destiny 2 related stuff, feel free to leave a comment below, or subscribe to the channel for more Destiny videos in general. But until then, we'll see you next time. Bye!